Hello everyone, and welcome back to Monstropolis. Last time I put down most of the terrain and laid out the roads, and today I'm ready to start building, and I'm going to begin with the street that Mike and Sully live on. Here are some screenshots of that street. In the Monsters, Inc. movie, one of the earliest scenes is a vertical pan shot that starts high and pans down toward the street that they live on. The early part of the pan shot shows the rooftops of the buildings on their street, and we can see that there are chimneys and water towers up there. We can also see some of the city buildings in the background, including the tall buildings with the domes on top. As the movie pans down, we see the sides of the buildings and what those look like. There are awnings and fire escapes and flower boxes on some of the windows, and it looks like there are also iron girders separating the buildings, which are vertical, and that's very interesting. I experimented with all kinds of ways to recreate that look, but nothing I did looked right to me, mainly because the basic building blocks are too wide. So I'm going to skip those vertical girders, and if we have time at the end, though, I'll show you my best solution for recreating that look, and you can decide if you want to do that or not. When the pan shot gets to street level, you can see the autumn trees that are lining the street, as well as some street lights and a mailbox. But what I really want you to focus in on is the base of the buildings. The buildings don't look like they're sitting directly on the ground. There's an empty crawl space or something underneath, and that empty space is covered by a grate of some kind. To get to the front door of each building, the monsters have to climb up some stairs. And here's a closer look at that empty space beneath the buildings. Between that and the vertical girders, it really gives the buildings a unique look. And as I mentioned, I couldn't replicate the look of this in a way that I liked. So I'm going to show you how I chose to build it. But I will also show you another alternative that I came up with to try to recreate the look of that empty space. And if you're on a system that has more memory than my Wii U, you may choose to do that instead. But I don't have the memory to do that, so I'm going to go the quicker and cheaper route, memory-wise. And here's a screenshot from later in the movie that also shows the rooftops. Again, we see a water tower and some chimney vents. The building on the left also has an angled roof, and those vertical girders between the buildings are topped by a little metallic pyramid. So this is what I'm going to attempt to build, and for today's video, I'm just going to focus on Mike and Sully's street. We'll build the rest of the neighborhood next time. But before we get started, let's see what we have to work with. So for the stairs, we have this little piece from the Fantasyland buildings and building sets group 4. And the trees that we're going to use, there are several of them from the plants drawer. We have the red maple tree, this orange maple tree, and the yellow aspen tree. And notice the height on those. Because when we get to the street lights, we do have a street light that looks similar to the ones in that screenshot, and this is from the Monsters University playset. But notice, this is really short compared to these trees, and I don't think that's going to work for us, so we're not going to use that. Instead, we have two other options. This one is from the Main Street USA buildings, and I actually think this is a little too tall. I also don't like the little gas lamp that's inside of that, because I just don't think that fits the look. So we're not going to use that. I'm going to use instead this one from the decorations drawer, the street lamp. And here is a little mailbox that's also from the decorations drawer. Let me pick that up. And we have a little fire hydrant there as well that we can use. The awnings come from building sets group 2, and there's a number of them there to the left. Also from building sets group 2, we have these water towers with the AC units and these little ledges, graded platforms that we can use for fire escapes. Now for the buildings, we have two options. We have the more realistic darker looking buildings from Building Sets Group 2. And we also have these buildings from the Incredibles playset. Those are over in the buildings drawer. These actually match the look, I think, of the movie a little bit better and the Monsters University building that we're going to use. The problem is that these awnings, which are interestingly in the same drawer, don't line up with the windows on these buildings at all. And this is true for all of the awnings. They put it right in the middle of the window, which doesn't make any sense. However, they do line up somewhat with these buildings over here, at least on the lower floors. When you get to the higher floors, though, they start to look a little bit too high up. And so these really won't work either for those higher windows, but they will work for the lower floors. And that's true for most of the buildings there in the Incredibles playset. And so we're going to use those instead. And I think that will work nice. They kind of match the brighter look of the fall trees. And so we're not going to use these at all. All right, so let's go ahead and begin our build. And again, this is going to be Mike and Sully Street, but I'm going to do this entire block. And I'm going to do this entire block. And let's get the start pad out of the way. For right now, we'll dump this in the middle of the street. And let's start with this building. We're going to bring this over here, line it up, and again, the buildings don't sit directly on the ground, so we need to raise this up one nudge. And you can kind of see I'm lining it up with the brick underneath the bridge there. And then we're going to put in some more buildings for the block. All right, for Mike and Sully Street, we'll do a couple of these buildings. And then around on the other side, oops, we'll put in this building. And this one, for this one, we'll put this down on the ground. Put that at ground level. And then just to complete the block so we don't have empty spaces up on top or on the side, we'll put that in. And to plug the gap in the middle, we'll stick one of these. And we'll raise this up a couple of inches off the ground. All right, so there's our first city block. All right. And I'll get to the space underneath what we're going to do there in a minute. I have to move this block, so to give you a hint, it's going to involve this block. All right, so coming over here, let's line up a little helper block. We're going to line it up with the edge of this building, and notice how far back this is. It's about 4 of these blocks. So we're going to put one over here with another of these like that. Okay. And then for the building on the corner, we'll use this one. That's going to sit right on the end like that. And for Mike and Sully Street, we'll kind of do the opposite of what we did on the other side. And you'll notice I'm not going all the way out to the road, and there's a reason for that that you'll see next time. Okay, over here, continuing around the block, put a couple of these in. And a couple of these. And then on this side, we'll put in another one of those. Okay, so there are the buildings. And we can take out these little helper blocks. And this leaves enough space for the sidewalk and the trees and the stairs and so on. Alright, we're going to be using these fronts, and there's a number of these out of the buildings drawer, as you can see there. And we're going to be placing these along the street here. And when we put these in, you're going to notice they stick out from the buildings a little bit. All right? And so because of that, when we put the base in for the buildings, we need to make sure we don't line them up directly with that corner. We're going to stick them out one nudge to the right there. And that's going to provide a base for the building front, because otherwise if you line this up flush with the building, that piece is going to stick out. So you don't want to do that. And for the theme on this is the cheap solution again that I'm going to do for this. And I'm going to use the toy box terrain. It provides a nice dark base, and this piece doesn't use up a ton of memory. We're going to run this all the way back, and you'll notice it's going to leave a little gap under there. That's okay. We're going to plug that gap later. Alright. And actually for this one, we'll move this over to plug the gap there on the right. This gap will get covered up. Okay, so that gives us our base. And I'm going to go ahead and build it with this base for right now, and I will show you the alternative at the end of the video. And you'll notice I'm not really worried about it sticking out of the other side, because we're going to do something different along this edge of the street. So I'm not too worried about that. And we have a gap under there, and that's okay. Alright, so there are the bases for the buildings. And again, this is the cheap solution memory-wise and the quickest. Okay, now let's go ahead and start filling in some details here. And since we're right here, let's go ahead and begin with these little pieces. And we're going to use a variety of these because I want to make sure we put some variety in here. I want the memory in this to not go too high, but I'm saving enough memory in the toy box so that we have room to add these kinds of details. For this one, we'll put this. Let's see, we need to cover up the windows, so we got to make sure we do that. So we'll put those in there like that. And then on the opposite side of the street, we'll kind of do the same sort of thing. Put the same sort of decorations on. And that looks pretty good. And then we can bring over our stairs. And line these up with the doors. Now this particular one doesn't have any kind of a door, so you can kind of just put it wherever you'd like. This one does have a door. And back here on this side, we'll put one right there. One in front of each of those, and one in front of here. Alright, so there are our stairs. And that's starting to look pretty good. Okay, for the rooftops. Let's go ahead and grab this. We're going to place one of these up here. About like that, and we'll try to center it on top of the roof. Do the same over here for this one. That looks pretty good. On the other side of the street, we'll put one on the middle of this building. You don't have to put one on top of every building, but it's a good idea to mix things up. And if you want to get creative and you have a memory for it, you can put some of these up here too. Something like this pigeon coop. Maybe a little tennis court. I don't think you'd find a tennis court up there necessarily, but it gives you some ideas of some different things you can try. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to plug this hole. So we'll do that. Okay. Now, for the awnings and fire escapes and that sort of thing, these will sit up here like this. And you can't really put these all the way across, so you could space these out a little bit. And I can't really go too much higher because now we're going to be into the window. So that's about as high as I can go with those. But we can do the same kind of thing over on this side. If you wanted to get fancy, you could try to put a row of them all the way across, but I think that's a little bit much. Kind of like the look of this a little bit better. Let's see. I think that other one has to come down a little bit. Yeah, that was too high. And this just adds a lot of interest to these buildings. It does take up some memory, but I think it just makes it look so much better when you do this. Because it doesn't look like just a plain, boring building. You got things sticking out from the buildings, and it just looks better. Again, we can't go any higher that way. We can use some of these big red ones, though, and kind of put them across like that. And now you look at that side of the street, and now it's really starting to look interesting. And again, on this side, we can do a similar kind of thing. Let's use this awning roof this time. We can put some green ones over here, really mix it up so that it looks a little bit different. You want every building to look different because we're using two buildings here, a red brick and a gray brick. So you want to add something different to each building so they don't look like they're the same building. And so I think that looks pretty good. We also had an angled roof on one of those buildings, and you'll find something like that in Building Sets Group 3. We have a number of different rooftop pieces here, but we have these red ones, a little bit dark for my taste. We also have these, and I think this would look pretty good. This looks very similar to what we saw on the roof on that one building in the nighttime screenshot. And just put these around. Don't have to do this on every building, but again, it's making each building look a little bit unique, and so that's good. Okay, I really like how that's starting to look. All right, next up, let's look at putting in some of the street lights and decorations here along the street. So we'll pick that one up, And again, you can see where these are from the drawer there, where I'm finding these. Put one of these here. Put one kind of right there. Just try to evenly space them. Don't have to be precise, but just kind of eyeball it a little bit. Somewhat evenly space these. And you can do the same on the other side as well, or you can just leave them on one side of the street. And I'm noticing now from my screen grab, I didn't actually put any on the other side of the street. So I'm going to make a little change here. I only did these on one side of the street. I did not realize I had done that. So let's mix this up a little bit. You know, there's nothing to say that I can't change my design on the fly. I'll try to put these across from the others if I can. There we go. Okay, so now we have some street lights. Let's grab some trees next. And we'll begin with these. Start with the middle one. And you don't want to put these right on the edge of the street like this. You want to set them back a little bit, but don't set them back too far because you got to give the player room to walk along there. So we'll put the first one like over here. And we want to mix these up a little bit, you know. Make sure you rotate them, especially if you put two of them near each other, because you don't want to have these oriented the same. When you rotate them, the tree looks a little different, and I think that's really helpful. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now, on the other side of the street, this is where things are going to change. Because I put those street lamps in there. So where I had the trees before is not going to be the same as where I'm going to put them now. And they don't have to be directly across from the other trees. You certainly don't want to block the staircases like this one would block that staircase. We're going to move this over a little bit. Maybe put it a little bit closer than you might like to that tree. There. And there's the street. You can see this is really starting to look interesting. I like that a lot. And the last little detail we've got is the mailbox. So let's go ahead and pick that up and put it where it needs to go. And I think I had this over here. Yeah, about like that. And I had a fire hydrant on the other side. That's right there nearby in the decorations drawer. And let's see, I had this sitting right here where the street light is. So we'll put this over there. All right, so there we go. Now, how are we doing on time? A little bit longer to do all that than I wanted, but let's go ahead and talk about our alternative for that space underneath the buildings. And this might take me a little bit over my half-hour time, but I know some of you might be very interested in this. So I'm going to slide this out for right now, because I'm actually going to keep that block. But if you want to do something different, and you want to try to match the look of what's underneath the buildings in those screen grabs, we're going to use some building blocks instead. So what you can do is for the space underneath the buildings, we're going to use the blacktop theme. I'll set that to be my theme. It's a nice, dark, almost black theme. And you'll place 2 of those like that. Okay? And then, let me place one of these out here just temporarily. And then we need to go grab the floor spaces. We'll come back to that vertical piece in a moment. So for the large floor and that vertical piece, which was what I would use for the girders, we're going to use the modern theme. So we go back to the left, set that to modern. And I'll pick this up. And you put this right in here like that. Okay? And by the way, you're going to do this for every building, not just the one I'm showing you. But I'm only doing the one just to give you an idea what you need to do. All right, then you go up to the platforming toys and go left to find the ledge hangs. And we find the vertical barrier piece. And you place these along the front. That gives you kind of your crosshatch underneath there. And now that's starting to look a lot more like the movie. But because you're using all of these pieces and the basic building blocks, this is going to take up a lot more memory than this. And again, on my Wii U, I don't have that. Now, if you want to put the girders in between the buildings, what you'll do is you'll use those vertical blocks. And again, set the theme on this to modern. And you'll need a number of these. Let me pick this up. And again, I would put this off of the toy box somewhere where you can't see it. So you can use those for the vertical pieces. And for the top on this, we have the triangle pyramid shape. You can use that for the top of the girders like you saw in the movie. And to connect these where they need to go, you're going to have to use a path. And you're going to have to use a path for each corner. And so you can decide if you want to spend the time doing this or not, but let me show you what you would do and what it would look like. And this is the best solution that I could come up with to try to match the look of the buildings. All right? So we're going to place this at the corner of the building, drop it down like you see there, and just drop 1 point like that and raise it up. You'll go into the path properties, turn off auto start objects when connected. Okay. And then you come over to your vertical pieces. Open the logic menu, do a new path connection. Come over here. I can select the silly thing. There we go. And connect it to that path. And you'll notice you can't really leave it right there because this piece here kind of covers that up. So you need to slide this out just a little bit. Notice also how wide this is and the fact that it's kind of covering up part of that awning and part of that window. So here you can kind of move this piece a little to the left and that'll solve the problem there. You don't have that solution over here. So this is another reason why I didn't really like this. I kind of liked the look of it, but I couldn't really get it to work because the block was too wide. But what you're going to do is come in here, and the pieces you're going to play with are either the horizontal offset. So see, if I set it to -1, that moved it away from the window on the right. If we use the forward-backward offset, we can pull this out a little bit. And that makes sure that grate doesn't cover it up. And so for that window, you get away with not covering that up. And you have your girder that's going up, and then you just connect additional blocks all the way up the building. So we do a new path connection, come over to the same path, toy box path. We need to select that block, go into the properties, toy box path, horizontal offset -1, forward backward -1, vertical. If you set this to 12, that puts it up on top of the other block, but it does leave a seam there. And if you don't like the seam, then you can change the vertical offset and just use 11. And that gets rid of the seam. And there you go. And then you'd come and connect the next block. You'd set the vertical on that to 22 and just keep connecting blocks all the way up till you get to the top edge of this building here. And then you can put the little triangle capper on top. Probably have to connect that to the path as well. And so that's what you end up with. And if you do that on all of these buildings, it doesn't look too bad. But again, for cases like this, it's going to be covering up a little bit of that window and a little bit of that window and the awning underneath. And over here, it's going to be doing the same sort of thing. But it does look pretty good. The other downside to this, of course, is you're going to be spending a lot of time connecting all of these paths, all these blocks to all these paths. And so it's up to you if you want to spend the time doing that. I do think it doesn't look too bad, and you can get away with having it overlap those windows if you can live with that. And I think it will look fairly decent. It definitely gives it a unique look that looks very similar to the movie. And then for this space back here, you just leave this all empty because you don't really need that to fill that, because that's going to get covered up. Well, we're out of time, so that'll be all for today. Next time I'll show you how to build the rest of Mike and Sully's neighborhood. Before you go, please hit the like button and leave a comment to let me know what you think of my recreation of this movie location. Do you like it? Is there something you would have done differently? Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and follow me on my blog if you haven't done that already. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.